Hey there. Thanks for tuning in. You ready for another episode of My Bigfoot Sighting? Alright then, let's do this.
Seen a bunch of rundown no-horse towns where the church is the backbone, love's in the plow, and the five-string melodies grooving, with the farmland rows where the roots run deep, beyond the noise of the busy streets, where the songs of the South are soothing. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah.
My Bigfoot sightings have happened since 1975 and had a span of decades in between. The family started with Bigfoot rumors on the property back in the early 70s in Lake Ann, Michigan. And at one point, my grandmother had a large shadow standing outside her house. And she turned around and called my grandfather, who was a deputy with the Benzie County Sheriff's Department. He brought the department with him. And while they were investigating, they found a 17-inch track that they cast, and there was a report made on this. And the next day, they found a couple more that led off into the woods. And ever after that, anytime you walked in a section of woods, it was deathly quiet. You knew you were being watched. And shortly after that, my uncle got lost in those woods and was followed for several hours by a big brown figure who would occasionally pop in and out. I was around 3 years old when I remember hearing about Bigfoot. And then when In Search Of came on, the Leonard Nimoy version on the original one showing the Patterson-Gimlin film, I looked at my dad and I said, "Is that what's at Grandma's house?" And he said, "Yes." So that was what started the interest in Bigfoot. And then as the years passed, in 1987, I used to love taking midnight drives through the backcountry roads where I was raised. And one night while coming around a corner on 669 headed to M72 toward Empire in Michigan, I saw what appeared to be like a big bag of garbage. And this is 11, 12 o'clock at night. Had my high beams on. Nobody else is on the road. And as I got closer, I was thinking, what a jerk, throwing something like that on the road. And then as I got closer, it shifted a little bit. And I thought, oh, that's a bear. That is a very big bear. This is cool. I'm going to see me a bear. Well, as I got within a few more feet, I hit the brakes and this bear stood up to my car. It turned and it squared its shoulders. And I had a 1979 El Camino, and the outside of the shoulders were as wide as my El Camino. It had to be between 8 and 9 feet tall. I could see the chest, abdomen, legs, and everything in between there. But his head was just out of sight, and all I could see were the red glow of those eyes. And I'll never forget those eyes because they were intense. As I'm parked and he is squared off, I think about hitting the horn, thinking he'll leave if I do this. But then something told me inside my head that if I hit that horn, I'm going to be in big trouble. So there was several seconds, knew he was looking at me just like he knew I was looking at him. When the Sasquatch turned around, took one step over the guardrail and was gone. That was my initial sighting in 87. I never told any about it for 30 years because back then, Bigfoot wasn't too good to talk about. In between my grandma's sighting and my sighting in 1987, so it was early 80s, my aunt, who lives in just a few miles from where my grandma was having her issues with the Bigfoot, started having chickens missing at her farm up in Lake Ann. And from what I understand, they had gotten a dog. And one night they heard a huge commotion and a crash all kinds of noise. They had ran outside, and there were 17-inch tracks that ran into the chicken coop, made a mess of the chickens, ran through the other side of the chicken coop and out into the woods. They called the police. The Benzie County Sheriff's Department came out. They investigated it. The DNR investigated it because they were there at the same time, and the Record Eagle came. And the DNR and Sheriff's Department we really don't know what to tell you, but this does look like Bigfoot. And she made the papers. They had the tracks cast. So they actually had a Sasquatch that was out there stealing chickens out of their farm. And then from what I understand, the dog is what chased it. And so it literally just it couldn't get out the door that it had gone in. So it just blew through the other side of the chicken coop. My more recent sightings started happening when my friend Lance Eby told me about an area in Benzie County. And so from the first time ever in 2019, I decided to look for Bigfoot. And going down this snow-covered road, 2-track, onto some state land, I would do the traditional, a few claps or something. I didn't want to do yells. I'm very shy. I didn't want to do yells. And I had a friend with me who was a total non-believer. I thought, well, first time out, the odds are I'm going to get skunked, but I'm going to go try this anyway. And as I walked down the hill, I happened to look up. I took a picture of the hill that was a bluff. And so when I took the picture, I thought, well, I'm going to walk up and see what I can find. And on the whole way down, I had been clapping twice. Never got a response. As I started to walk up the hill, it sounded like 2 catcher's mitts hit together twice, very rapidly. And I turned and looked at my friend who was a non-believer. She has tears in her eyes at this point because she is scared. And I said, you realize it takes 2 hands to clap? And she's like, yeah, that's the problem. I want to go home. So as we started to walk back up the hill through the snow, all of a sudden behind us, we started to hear a couple tree breaks. Progress a little farther. The breaks were then accompanied with a couple whoops. Progress a little farther, and all of a sudden there was a chain link fence at the beginning of the road. And as we were walking toward it, the chain link fence began rattling very loudly. So now both of us are very concerned because we're surrounded. And I put my keys in her hand and told her, you should, keep walking and we'll go. I stopped and turned around and happened to look. And as I looked, I saw a large shape jump behind a tree. It was a fleeting glance. I'm guessing 6 or 7 feet tall. It wasn't huge, but it was big. And that was when I turned to her and said, you need to go. Let's go, and kind of hurried her up the hill. And then we left. So we left the place alone for a couple months. And when I finally got the nerve, I decided I wanted to go back. And as we went back, we started to leave little things here and there, seeing if we, get any type of interaction. And at first it was nothing, but then all of a sudden, like little jars of peanut butter we would put out would disappear. And we would turn around and find the jars would be completely clean, like they'd been through a dishwasher. And some of them even had the lid screwed back on, and there wasn't a bite mark on them. So we knew it had to be more than a raccoon or a possum or deer. And we started leaving little trinkets out. And sometimes the trinkets would disappear. I had one painted rock that we put in one place where we put peanut butter. And the rock disappeared. And I continued walking probably another half mile to the next little station we had for gifting. The rock was there face up with the letters face up as well. So something carried it from one of my peanut butter spots through the woods to another peanut butter spot. So we keep having these little interactions and still finding the jars, which made me feel better. I knew somebody wasn't playing with us. And then the first real sighting out there was, as I was putting these peanut butter jars out, I would always clap to let them know I'm there. I do a little 2 clapper. And then one day I thought, well, I'm going to have a little fun. Instead of clapping, I'm going to jingle my keys. As soon as I jingled those keys, I heard by my truck something bulldozing through the woods. So I dashed out to the truck just in time to see. The shoulders had to be bigger than Hulk Hogan. I'm 6 foot, 300 pounds, and those shoulders were way wider than mine. And the head just seemed to sit on top as it jumped over the bluff. And as I walked up, there were 17-inch tracks around my truck. And I was looking for my pop I had set on my bumper. And apparently it had taken interest in the pop because the pop was gone. The tracks ran away from the truck and over the bluff. So that was when he was big, red, hair 4 to 5 inches long. He's the one I call Big Red. And to me, that was cool. He wasn't aggressive. He was definitely following me around the whole time I was out there and took an interest in my A&W cream soda. So then we started to get brave and started going out at night. And as soon as the sun starts to set, you will start getting tree breaks. You'll start getting faint whoops. And they will turn and interact. They'll answer, a couple tree breaks here and there if you, depending on the mood. They'll repeat the clap. That's the one that gets me, is when I clap twice and they clap twice. That means they're in the mood to interact for a little bit. The sighting that scared me the most, though, was when in November, just before deer season, all the activity in my area stopped. So I didn't know if it was deer season that they understood this and they moved deeper into the woods, but the activity ceased. And then in December, it was after New Year's Eve, I started driving down the road just to see how far I could go down, if I could get to my area, when I saw a set of deer tracks going up the hill. And I saw 2 giant footprints that covered a huge distance up this hill. And I had a friend with me, and I said, I have an idea what made that. I said, let's shut the lights off. We'll take flashlights, and then we'll walk up the hill and see what can happen. So my friend Shauna was about 105 pounds soaking wet. The snow was roughly knee deep. And we start to walk up the hill. And as we get to the top of the hill, we hear a large snap. Stops us in our tracks. We can hear some shuffling on both sides of us. And at that point, I said, okay, let's turn the lights on and see what happens. I turned the flashlight on. And in front of me at the end of the beam is easily an 8-foot reddish brown, hairy figure whose shoulders were immense. And as soon as the flashlight turned on, it brought its right arm up to cover its eyes. And you could see the reddish brown hair hanging. It was probably 3 or 4 inches long. And then I turned to my friend and I said, get in the truck, go. If I'm not 30 seconds behind you, you leave. And as soon as we turned, the Sasquatch roared. And it was so loud that it literally vibrated our clothing. It was like being at a rock concert. And it would almost freeze you in your tracks. I managed to keep pushing her toward the truck. And then we could hear it following us out. It was crash, thud, like it was snapping branches behind us as it stepped. And I literally picked my friend up at the bottom of the hill, throw her in the truck. And I was so scared that I lost my footing, slipped under the truck. And as I'm trying to scramble my way out, she starts the truck. I'm like, uh-oh, she took me serious. She is going to run me over at this point. And so I scrambled out some more, got in the truck, turned in time to see a great big black shadow standing at the top of the hill. The Squatch was definitely making sure we were leaving. And we did leave, and a couple minutes later, she says, we need to stop at Shell because she had wet her pants at that point. And if I had not used the bathroom earlier, I would have done the same thing. That roar was literally a note that you lost control. And then after that, it took me a little while to get the nerve to go back into the woods after that particular, because something had changed. They were definitely more aggressive. I think maybe I might have interrupted dinner because of the deer tracks going up the hill. And the two Squatch tracks were very wide, so I think they chased it down. And maybe I interrupted dinner. There was kids hanging around, or who knows. But if somebody came into my living room while I was having dinner, I would escort them out too. So I can't blame them there. I would go out and leave recorders at night, though, because the area I really wanted to get to was snowed in. It's a seasonal road. It's not taken care of. But I did leave a recorder out. And one night, you can hear something come up to the recorder, scratch on the recorder, and hear it walk off. And then there was about an hour and a half of them breaking sticks, and you hear knocking. And this is at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning by this point. It goes on for about an hour and a half. There's nobody out there. So whatever was building things was definitely had power behind it, because there's quite a few of the loud knocks and definitely activity out there. After the snow left, we're finding 23-inch footprints, barefoot human-type footprints, but are 23 inches and over an inch or so deep into hard soil. We are also out, and while we are putting peanut butter out, we can hear them following us. They'll make a few twig breaks, or they'll make a couple of footsteps just to let us know that they're there. Right now, it has been over a year and a half we've been out there. So I think there's a type of relationship of some sort where they know my truck, know who I am. One night I went out there and sat recently, and it was 11 o'clock at night, and where I parked, there are motion lights. So you go a mile down this 2-track, and because it's on a state park, they have motion lights so they can keep track of who's going in and out. And so I sat under these motion lights. I heard them rustling around, something rustling around, I should say. I didn't have my thermal out. And I decided, what the heck, I'm out here. I want to get evidence. So I decided to take a couple jars of peanut butter to one gifting tree, put the peanut butter in the tree, and I used popsicle sticks under the peanut butter because they seem to like the popsicle sticks, and they line them up, like sort them by color. They put them in different shapes on the ground. You never know what's going to happen with them. But the ones that don't get taken when the popsicle sticks, it usually winds up being a raccoon managed to knock the peanut butter down or something like that. So to me, it's like the Bigfooter saying, yeah, it was us. So that night, when I put the popsicles out, or popsicle sticks under the peanut butter, I walked about 30 to 40 yards away, was putting peanut butter in another tree when I heard some commotion in the first one. And I walked back, and the peanut butter was already gone. Popsicle sticks were laying, sorted by color, 2 by 2. And I got my night vision scope out. It's a passive system, but there is an illuminator. I wasn't getting anything with just the passive, where it's using starlight. I could see something moving back and forth, something very big moving back and forth. But as soon as I turned that IR light on for the illuminator, it took off and ran away. And went out the next day, and there were 17-inch tracks making a hasty retreat through those trees. And then recently, we went out, and it was even during the day. A friend and I were talking, Lance Eby, and he's like, what do you think? Because everything went quiet. No birds, no chipmunks. Everybody was quiet. Told him, I think there's something here. Lance breaks out his thermal. We peek over the hill, and next thing you see is Lance moving back and forth, and I'm trying to look, and you can see on the thermal a pretty large yellow individual. It was all uniform, one color, and it's ducking back and forth behind the trees down a hill. I would have to guess 30 or 40 yards away. That's a total guess on my part. And you couldn't see it without the thermal. And then next thing you know, the thermal's gone. So we're like, well, that's pretty cool. At least we got something. It was a good trip. Lance had driven 4 hours up to see me. And I said, well, there's one more spot I want to show you. And so I take him. We walk into the woods a little bit. I show him a place where I put peanut butter, and it's consistently gone. Lance found a great 16 3/4 inch track, very deep, had toes, beauty of a track. And the next thing is Lance is like, look there, look, with some pretty good intensity in his voice. And there was a few curse words even flying, which is unusual. And he grabs me by the shoulders, pulls me over. And next thing I see is a great big, had to be dark brown, light black face staring at us. And then he's like, oh, there's more than one. And sure enough, there was one who popped out to the left who was absolutely massive. He had to be every bit of 10 feet tall. And they ducked back and forth for a few minutes watching us. And just as quick as they came, they disappeared. Did not hear a song when they left. It was absolutely amazing that something that big can move that fast and that silently. Which brings me to the night I got chased out. I had taken pictures before I walked that hill. And I sent the pictures after my experience to a couple friends, and he says, there's something there. He said, but I'm just looking at a magnifying glass. I'm going to send these to somebody and have him look at it. Well, that somebody happened to be Bob Daigle. And I'd heard of Bob, and I'm like, if anybody is going to rip these photos apart, Bob is going to call it the way he sees it. And when he looked at the photos, he immediately messaged me back after lighting them up. And he says, you have 3 there. He says, you got a face on the right and there's 2 on the left. So Bob Daigle's confirming that. And we had ran in between them. I couldn't believe it. But they were every bit of 12 feet tall when I went back and did the reenactment of those steps. And still have the pictures. They're not obviously like the Patterson-Gimlin film clear, but when you lighten them up, you can see the shadows. You can even see parts of the face. And when you see how high they are from the ground, it is truly scary. And those squatches, Benzie County is known for having big squatches. I've seen a few different reports, and I can tell you that the one I saw, and I'm shaking thinking about this, but the size of that arm that came up was bigger than both my legs. It was just truly terrifying. And then more recently, I myself got a thermal camera and was trying to learn how to use it with all the different settings. And this one was another one that was pretty unnerving to me because I'm sitting on this gate. And I learned that the more relaxed I am, the higher the chance that there's an encounter, that they're willing to do something. If I go intense after a day of work, most of the time, nothing's going to happen. If I'm going in calm and happy, for some reason, they can pick up on this, I think. And they turn around and are a little more willing to interact. They're a little more willing to whistle. They're a little more willing to repeat my little clap that I do. And so when I got my thermal, I went out and I thought I had it set on black and white with white being hot. So I've got myself steadied on a gate. I'm watching down this 2-track. I do a clap. I hear the 2 claps behind me. But I decided something was telling me to keep watching that gate. Keep my eyes on the gate. And as I'm watching, I'm looking for the white spots, and there's 2 black spots or gaps in the trees. So I'm just watching, and all of a sudden I thought, man, I must be shaking or something. I don't know what's going on because the gaps in the trees are getting bigger. What is this about? And then my friend who was with me said the same thing. She goes, why are the gaps getting bigger? I'm like, I don't know what's going on. She goes, they're moving. I'm like, there's no way the gaps are moving. That doesn't happen. She's like, no, that's coming closer. And I turned as I heard a snap, and I noticed my truck engine was black. So I had black as hot. I turned around, and these gaps in the trees are not actually gaps in the trees. They're two very tall, very wide individuals. I'm guessing Sasquatch, from the size of them, are walking toward me, and the pace is picking up at this point. And I believe they can't see the thermal. And we had just put out a whole bunch of corn, and we had just brought more peanut butter. So I think they were on their way to collect their little buffet. And we're not aware. We knew they were coming, because as soon as we turned around and I took footsteps away was when I started hearing footsteps. It's almost like they knew, the Squatches knew they were busted. Now they didn't have to be in silent mode. So we scurried. We got in the truck. And as I started the truck to hit my brakes to put the truck in drive, I had my foot on the brake. The brake lights illuminate two large shadows behind my truck. So within a matter of 30 seconds, they had covered about 60 yards to get behind my truck. So left. And since then, we've been back. We go every couple days. We put the peanut butter out. On our way out, one kept whooping. It almost sounded like a dog, but it was way too deep and powerful for a dog. But it was definitely a barking. But when I play it for other people, they're like, that's too big. That's not a dog. That's a Squatch following you out, letting you know he's there. So other than that, there are lots of little instances. Oh, I did have one as I was walking down the path. This was about the fourth time I was out. And this is where I first saw Big Red. The Squatch at the time was about 6 foot, but he's almost as wide as he is tall. As I was walking down the trail, I looked up and I kept seeing this red stump, and I couldn't figure out if the termites had got it and the sun had bleached it out or what it was. I kept looking at it, and nothing moved. And I thought, it's such a funny shape because it's got this weird, looks like head and shoulders. So as soon as I pulled my phone out to take a picture, I raised that phone, and the Squatch stood up and jumped off a very steep bluff and never made a sound. So that was my first sighting of Big Red at that time. And since then, he made an appearance. I was taking some pictures from across the road, and I saw something in the tree line. So I decided to take a few pictures. As I got closer to the road, when I got to the road, Big Red stood up, took 2 steps, and had disappeared into the woods. But he had grown almost 2 feet. He is absolutely massive now. I think he's the one who takes the peanut butter. But we have also found the 23-inch tracks are usually paired with a set of 17-inch, but we've found tracks as little as 8-inch. So I actually think we got a family out there. And the really weird thing is, even though there's so many bears up here in Benzie County right now, in this area, there's none. There is no sign of bear, no sign of a big cat. I think the males are keeping the predators out at this point, because I've got people sending me videos from all over the place. And there's no bears where I'm at. So the investigation still continues, though, because I went today and they had taken peanut butter out of a barrel. They took a glow-in-the-dark ball that I had placed, and they had turned around and taken another ball that was outside the barrel and put it inside the barrel. They'd taken the markers off the tree that I had. I had a piece of bark circled over the tree so I could find the barrel much easier with the tall grass. And they also took some colored popsicle sticks down that I had marked. And there were 17-inch tracks walking away from the barrel. So hopefully when I go out Saturday night, I plan on taking my thermal, and maybe we'll have some more images and the stories to share very soon. But for now, those are my Bigfoot sightings.
Well, that's it for tonight's show. If you've had a Bigfoot sighting and would like to be a guest, please go to mybigfootsighting.com and let us know. Thanks for listening. Have a great night.
Seen a bunch of rundown no-horse towns where the church is the backbone, loves and the plow, and the five-string melodies grooving, with the farmland rows where the roots run deep, beyond the noise of the busy streets, where the songs of the South are soothing. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah. The sound of a memory brings me back to the bluegrass playing on my dad's 8-track. His pickup man had been through it, getting through the day on Scruggs and Skags, booking eight bales to those Tennessee jams. There's no other way that I'd do it. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah. Some call it backwards and double time, getting to the soul and the tremolo Kentucky style. Those are the anthems drumming out, country boy living. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Pace of the city life drives me wild. The only tune is the cars rushing by, with the bass on the stereos booming. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah. Some call it backwards and double time, getting to the soul and the tremolo Kentucky style. Those are the anthems drumming out, country boy living. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Some call it backwards and double time, getting to the soul and the tremolo Kentucky style. Those are the anthems drumming out, country boy living. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm, fried chicken, porch swing, mama's best sweet tea kind of sound.